On a stormy night in late November 1981, three towering names in Hollywood set sail from the coast of California near Catalina Island aboard a 60-foot yacht called the Splendour. The passengers were screen legend Natalie Wood, her husband Robert Wagner, and her Brainstorm co-star Christopher Walken. By the following morning, Wood had vanished from the boat, and her body was later recovered from the water wearing a heavy red jacket. For decades, the account given by Christopher Walken to police shaped the public understanding of what took place that night. This is the story of that weekend, the investigation that reopened 3 decades later, and the very different paths taken afterward by the people connected to it. The trip began as an ordinary post-Thanksgiving escape. Wood and Wagner decided to take the Splendour out for a relaxing weekend near Santa Catalina Island, inviting along 38-year-old Christopher Walken, who was starring opposite Wood in the science fiction film Brainstorm, then in production in North Carolina. Dennis Davern, the couple's regular boat captain, piloted the vessel. On the evening of Saturday, November 28th, the group went ashore to a restaurant at Isthmus Cove for dinner and drinks. Onlookers describe a mood as festive at first, though an undercurrent of tension grew as the night wore on. Around 10 p.m., the party returned to the yacht, and shortly afterward, an argument broke out in the main cabin. Accounts from the time suggest the dispute touched on work matters and interpersonal dynamics among the group, and it grew heated enough that Wagner reportedly broke a wine bottle against a table in anger. After the outburst, the cabin fell quiet and Wood retreated to the master bedroom, upset by what had happened. No one aboard reported seeing her again. Sometime after midnight, Wagner discovered she was missing, and the crew soon noticed that the yacht's small dinghy, the Valiant, was also gone. At first, it seemed possible Wood had taken the dinghy to shore on her own. As the night dragged on without any sign of her, alarm grew, and a search operation was launched along the Catalina coast. Just before 8 a.m. on Sunday, searchers found her body floating roughly a mile from the yacht, dressed in a nightgown, a flannel shirt, and a red down jacket. The dinghy was discovered nearby, empty, as authorities scrambled to understand how a healthy, experienced actress had ended up dead in the ocean. Christopher Walken's statement became a central piece of the record. He was cooperative with investigators and gave a consistent account. The disagreement in the cabin, he said, had been a professional matter that ended before anyone went to bed. He recalled retiring to his own cabin shortly after Wood went to hers, and said he neither saw her leave nor heard any sounds of a struggle splash or the dinghy's motor over the noise of the rain and waves. In later years, when Walken did speak publicly about the tragedy, he consistently described his belief that it was a horrible accident. His theory was that the noise of the dinghy knocking against the yacht's hull in rough water likely drew it out onto the deck to secure it, and that in slick shoes on a wet, slippery surface, she lost her footing, struck her head, and fell into the water. He pointed out that her heavy, waterlogged jacket would have made it nearly impossible to swim or climb back aboard. This explanation lined up with the original coroner's finding of accidental drowning, and the case remained closed for almost 30 years. That changed in November 2011, just before the tragedy's 30th anniversary, when the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department announced it was reopening the investigation. The catalyst wasn't new physical evidence, but a change of story from Dennis Davern, the boat's captain. Davern admitted publicly that he had not told investigators the full truth in 1981, saying he had held back details out of fear and pressure from people close to Wagner. In his revised account, Davern described a much more volatile scene aboard the Splendour, a loud alcohol-fueled fight that spilled from the cabin onto the rear deck, with Wagner shouting at Wood shortly before she disappeared. Davern also claimed that when he tried to intervene, Wagner told him to stay out of it, and that once it was found missing, Wagner resisted immediately alerting the Coast Guard, preferring a search on their own first. These new claims prompted detectives to revisit the case with fresh eyes, bringing in forensic pathologists to re-examine the original findings. The result was significant. In 2012, the Los Angeles County Chief Medical Examiner revised Wood's official cause of death from a simple accidental drowning to drowning and other undetermined factors. The updated report noted fresh bruising on her arms, wrists, shoulders, and face that appeared to have happened before she entered the water, rather than from a fall or from being in the ocean. Experts said the pattern of bruising was consistent with someone being grabbed or struck. Additionally, Oceanography and behavioral experts raised doubts about the dinghy theory altogether, noting that it had a well-known, intense fear of water and would have been unlikely to willingly go out alone on a rocking, choppy sea to untie a small boat. The revised classification of Wood's death opened the door for homicide investigators to treat the case as a potential crime with no statute of limitations. In February 2018, the Sheriff's Department took the significant step of naming Robert Wagner a person of interest in his wife's death, citing inconsistencies in his account over the years, particularly around the timeline of events and the hours-long delay before contacting the Coast Guard. Wagner, through his attorneys, has repeatedly declined requests for a new, formal interview, maintaining that he answered every question fully back in 1981. Christopher Walken's position in the investigation has remained unchanged and uncomplicated by comparison. Investigators have stated clearly that he has never been considered a suspect or person of interest, noting that his original account of retiring to his cabin before the final argument has held up consistently over the decades. Even so, the case remains unresolved. By the early 2020s, detectives acknowledged they had largely run out of new leads without the kind of definitive evidence needed to bring formal charges. The passage of time degraded or lost physical evidence, and the deaths of several key figures from that era have left investigators relying mostly on circumstantial evidence and conflicting memories. The file technically remains open, meaning new evidence or testimony could still prompt action, but for now the full truth of what happened that night remains locked away with the people who were aboard the Splendour. To understand the dynamics at play that weekend, it helps to look at the project that connected all three. The 1983 science fiction film Brainstorm, directed by visual effects innovator Douglas Trumbull. The story followed scientists who developed technology capable of recording human thoughts and sensations, with Walken and with Cast as estranged spouses who reconnect while working on the invention together. The two leads reportedly built an easy, energetic rapport on set, bonding over long dinners and rehearsals during the North Carolina shoot. That closeness apparently did not escape the notice of Wagner, who was often on set and, according to observers at the time, seemed uneasy about the growing friendship between his wife and her co-star, a tension some believe factored into the decision to invite Walken along for what was meant to be a friendly holiday trip on the yacht. Wood's death, coming while filming was nearly finished, threw the production into turmoil. The studio initially considered shutting the film down and filing an insurance claim, but Trumbull fought to complete it, reworking scenes, using body doubles, and leaning heavily on Walken to finish the story. For Walken, returning to shoot additional footage without his co-star and friend was reportedly an emotionally difficult experience. Brainstorm was eventually released in 1983, dedicated to Wood's memory. In the aftermath, Christopher Walken chose not to speak publicly about the details of that night, a policy he largely maintained for the rest of his career. Instead, he focused on his work, building one of the more eclectic and enduring filmographies in modern cinema, from unsettling roles in projects like The Dead Zone and A View to a Kill, to now iconic turns in Pulp Fiction and an Academy Award nomination.